The small spaceship shook violently as it entered the atmosphere of the unknown planet. Sarah gripped her seat tightly, her knuckles turning white. Warning lights flashed all around her, and alarms blared in her ears. She knew she was in trouble. Come on, she muttered, frantically pressing buttons and pulling levers. But it was no use. The ship was going down, and there was nothing she could do about it. With a deafening crash, the ship hit the ground. Sarah was thrown forward, her head slamming against the control panel. Everything went black. When she opened her eyes, Sarah found herself surrounded by twisted metal and broken glass. She blinked, trying to clear her vision. Her head throbbed, and she could feel something warm trickling down her forehead. Blood. Slowly, carefully, she unbuckled her harness and stood up. The ship's door was jammed, but she managed to force it open with a grunt. As she stepped out, Sarah gasped. She was in a jungle unlike anything she had ever seen before. Towering trees with glowing blue leaves stretched up into a pink sky. Strange, bird-like creatures with 6 wings soared overhead, their calls echoing through the air. The ground beneath her feet was soft and spongy, covered in a carpet of purple moss. Sarah reached for her communication device, but it was dead. She was alone, stranded on an alien world with no way to call for help. "Okay, Sarah," she said to herself, taking a deep breath. "You've trained for this. First things first, find water, food, and shelter." She grabbed her emergency pack from the wreckage of her ship and set off into the jungle. As she walked, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up, and she found herself constantly looking over her shoulder. After about an hour of walking, Sarah heard the sound of running water. She quickened her pace, pushing through the dense foliage until she came to a small stream. The water was crystal clear and looked safe to drink. She knelt down, cupped her hands, and brought the cool liquid to her lips. That's when she heard it, a low, rumbling growl that made her blood run cold. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Slowly, she turned around. There, standing not 10 feet away, was the most terrifying creature she had ever seen. It was massive, easily twice her size, with jet-black scales that seemed to absorb the light around it. 6 glowing red eyes were fixed on her, and its mouth was filled with razor-sharp teeth. 2 sets of arms ended in wicked claws, and a long, spiked tail swished back and forth behind it. Sarah knew what this was. She had heard stories, seen blurry images. This was Zyx, the galaxy's most lethal predator. A creature so dangerous that entire planets had been evacuated at the mere rumor of its presence. And now, here she was, face to face with one. Sarah's mind raced. She had no weapons, no way to defend herself. Running was pointless. Zyx was faster than any human could ever hope to be. Fighting was suicide. So she did the only thing she could think of. She stayed perfectly still and maintained eye contact. Zyx tilted its head, seeming confused by Sarah's lack of reaction. It took a step forward, its claws digging into the soft ground. Sarah's heart was beating so fast, she thought it might explode. But she didn't move. She didn't even blink. For what felt like an eternity, they stared at each other, predator and prey, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then something unexpected happened. Zyx made a sound, not a growl or a roar, but something almost like a purr. It was deep and resonant, vibrating through the air. Sarah blinked in surprise. Was this creature curious? Slowly, very slowly, Sarah raised her hand, palm out. It was a universal gesture of peace, one that had served humanity well in its encounters with other alien species. Zyx watched her movement carefully, its multiple eyes tracking every twitch of her fingers. Then, to Sarah's utter amazement, it raised one of its own hands, mimicking her gesture. In that moment, something changed. The air of hostility dissipated, replaced by a sense of mutual curiosity and wonder. Sarah let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She was alive, and more than that, She had just made first contact with a species that was supposed to be impossible to communicate with. As the pink sun began to set, casting an otherworldly glow over the jungle, Sarah realized that her adventure was only just beginning. She was stranded on an alien world, face to face with the galaxy's deadliest predator. But somehow, against all odds, she had found an ally. The human had defied expectations, and in doing so, had possibly changed the course of galactic history. As the alien sun rose, painting the sky in shades of lavender and gold, Sarah found herself in a situation she never could have imagined. She was sitting on a fallen log, mere feet away from Zix, the galaxy's most feared predator. The creature was curled up on the ground, its 6 red eyes half closed, watching her with what seemed like curiosity. Sarah's mind raced, trying to process the events of the past few hours. After their initial standoff, Zix had not attacked. Instead, it had simply stayed, as if it was just as intrigued by Sarah as she was by it. Suddenly, an ear-splitting screech tore through the air. Sarah jumped to her feet, her heart pounding. Zix was instantly alert, its scales bristling. From the dense jungle emerged a horror. It was like a giant centipede, but with razor-sharp mandibles and glowing green eyes. Sarah had never seen anything like it, but she knew it meant trouble. The centipede creature lunged at Sarah, its jaws snapping. She dove to the side, narrowly avoiding its attack. But as she scrambled to her feet, she realized she had nowhere to run. That's when something unexpected happened. Zix leaped forward, placing itself between Sarah and the new threat. It let out a bone-chilling roar that made the ground shake. The centipede creature hesitated, seeming to size up its new opponent. Then, with lightning speed, it struck at Zix. What followed was a battle unlike anything Sarah had ever seen. Zix moved with incredible agility, its claws slashing through the air. The centipede creature was relentless, its numerous legs allowing it to attack from multiple angles. Sarah knew she should run, to use this distraction to escape, but something kept her rooted to the spot. She couldn't leave Zix to face this monster alone. Looking around frantically, Sarah spotted a large, jagged rock. She grabbed it, its weight reassuring in her hands. As Zix and the centipede creature grappled, Sarah saw her chance. With all her strength, she hurled the rock at the centipede's head. Her aim was true. The rock struck the creature's eye, causing it to rear back in pain. Zix seized the opportunity, sinking its teeth into the centipede's neck. With a final, haunting shriek, the centipede creature went limp. The forest fell silent. Zix turned to Sarah, green blood dripping from its jaws. For a moment, she feared it might turn on her next, but instead it made that strange purring sound again. Sarah let out a shaky laugh. "I guess we make a pretty good team, huh?" As if in response, Zix tilted its head and blinked its many eyes. The rest of the day passed in a blur of survival tasks. Sarah knew she needed to find better shelter and a reliable source of food and water. To her surprise, Zix stayed with her, seeming to understand her needs. When Sarah searched for edible plants, Zix would nudge her away from certain ones, as if warning her of danger. When she needed to reach high branches for fruit, Zix would rear up, allowing her to climb onto its back. As night fell, Sarah found herself huddled in a small cave, a fire crackling in front of her. Zix lay at the entrance, its massive form blocking out the strange noises of the alien night. Sarah's mind was whirling. In just one day, her entire understanding of the universe had been turned upside down. Zix, the supposedly mindless killing machine, had saved her life. More than that, it seemed to be helping her. She pulled out her personal data pad. It was damaged from the crash, but the basic functions still worked. Sarah began to record her observations. Day 1 on unknown planet, she spoke softly. "I've made contact with a Zix, previously thought to be the galaxy's most lethal predator. Current observations suggest a high level of intelligence and even empathy. Further study needed." Sarah paused, looking at the alien creature that had become her unlikely protector. Also, she added, I think I'm going to need a name for it. Can't keep calling it or Zix forever. As if sensing her gaze, Zix turned its head, those glowing red eyes meeting hers. In that moment, Sarah felt a connection she couldn't explain. She was no longer just a stranded human on an alien world. She was an explorer on the brink of a discovery that could change everything. With that thought, Sarah closed her eyes, allowing herself to rest. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she was safe, and she wasn't alone. The human and the predator, united by circumstances, had taken their first steps towards an alliance that would defy the expectations of the entire galaxy. The alien sun rose, casting a warm glow over the strange jungle. Sarah stirred, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then reality crashed back. She was stranded on an unknown planet, and her only ally was the galaxy's most feared predator. Sarah looked towards the cave entrance. Zix was still there, its massive form blocking out most of the light. As if sensing her gaze, it turned its 6 red eyes towards her. Good morning, big guy, Sarah said, stretching. I think I'll call you Rex. You know, like T-Rex. Seemed fitting. Rex tilted its head, making that strange purring sound Sarah was starting to recognize as a sign of contentment. As they ventured out of the cave, Sarah's stomach growled loudly. She needed to find food, and soon. Rex seemed to understand. It led her through the dense jungle, occasionally stopping to sniff the air. Suddenly, Rex froze. Its scales bristled, and a low growl rumbled in its throat. Sarah tensed, looking around frantically. What new danger were they facing? Then she saw it. About 50 feet away, trapped under a fallen tree, was another alien creature. It looked like a cross between a deer and a lizard, with iridescent scales and large, sad eyes. Sarah's first instinct was to help the poor thing. But as she took a step forward, Rex blocked her path with one of its massive arms. What's wrong, Rex? Sarah asked, confused. Then it hit her. This creature was prey. Rex saw it as food. For a moment, Sarah was torn. Her human compassion wanted to save the trapped alien, but she knew Rex needed to eat, and if she was honest with herself, so did she. Taking a deep breath, Sarah made a decision. Okay, Rex, she said softly. But let's make it quick. Rex seemed to understand. With surprising speed and grace, it moved towards the trapped creature. Sarah closed her eyes, not wanting to watch. When she opened them again, it was over. Rex had made a clean kill, ending the creature's suffering swiftly. As Rex began to eat, Sarah forced herself to approach. She needed food too, and she couldn't afford to be squeamish. Using a sharp piece of metal from her crashed ship, she carefully cut off a portion of the meat. Thanks, Rex, she said, patting its scales gently. To her surprise, Rex pushed some of the meat towards her with its snout. Sarah felt a lump in her throat. This creature, supposedly a mindless killing machine, was sharing its food with her. The gesture touched her deeply. As they ate in companionable silence, Sarah's mind wandered to her situation. She needed to find a way off this planet, or at least a way to signal for help. But how? Suddenly, an idea struck her. Her ship's emergency beacon. If she could repair it, maybe she could boost its signal enough to reach passing ships. Excited by the prospect, Sarah quickly finished her meal. Come on, Rex, she said, standing up. We've got work to do. They made their way back to Sarah's crashed ship. As she rummaged through the wreckage, pulling out parts and tools, Rex stood guard, its keen senses alert for any danger. Hours passed as Sarah worked on the beacon. The alien sun beat down mercilessly, and sweat poured down her face. But she didn't give up. This was her best chance at rescue. As she connected the last wire, Sarah held her breath. Would it work? With a crackle and a beep, the beacon came to life. A steady pulse of energy began to emit from it, reaching out into space. Yes, Sarah shouted, pumping her fist in the air. Rex, startled by her outburst, made a questioning sound. Sarah turned to her unlikely friend, her face split in a wide grin. "We did it, Rex. If anyone's out there, they'll be able to find us now." But her celebration was short-lived. A distant roar echoed through the jungle, followed by another and another. It sounded like a whole pack of creatures, and they were getting closer. Rex's scales stood on end, and it let out a warning growl. Sarah's blood ran cold. Whatever was coming, it wasn't friendly. She looked at Rex, fear and determination battling in her heart. "Looks like we've got company, big guy. You ready for this?" Rex's response was to move closer to Sarah, its massive body shielding her from the direction of the approaching sounds. As the roars grew louder, Sarah gripped her makeshift weapon tightly. She and Rex stood side by side, human and predator united against a common threat. Whatever was coming, they would face it together. Their unexpected alliance was about to be put to the ultimate test. The roars grew louder as Sarah and Rex stood their ground. Through the dense foliage, they could see movement, sleek, dark shapes darting between trees. Sarah's heart raced, but she stood firm beside her alien companion. Suddenly, the attackers burst into view. They looked like a cross between wolves and panthers, with gleaming purple fur and razor-sharp teeth. There were 5 of them, all snarling and circling Sarah and Rex. Rex let out a deafening roar, causing the wolf panthers to hesitate. Sarah knew they needed a plan. Fast. "Rex," she whispered, "we need to split them up. Can you understand me?" To her amazement, Rex nodded slightly. Sarah's mind raced. She pointed to a nearby tree with low-hanging branches. "I'll climb. You draw them in. When I signal, move away quickly." Rex made a low rumbling sound that Sarah took as agreement. As the wolf panthers charged, Sarah sprinted for the tree, scrambling up its trunk. Rex stood his ground, slashing at the attackers with his powerful claws. From her perch, Sarah could see the whole battle. Rex was incredibly strong, but outnumbered. She needed to act now. "Hey," she shouted, waving her arms. "Over here, you overgrown kittens." 2 of the wolf panthers looked up, distracted. It was the opening Rex needed. With lightning speed, he darted away from the group, leaving the confused predators bunched together under Sarah's tree. Sarah grinned. It was time for some human ingenuity. She pulled out the emergency flare from her survival kit and ignited it. The bright, sizzling light startled the wolf panthers. Before they could react, Sarah dropped the flare right in their midst. The explosion of light and sound sent the creatures into a panic. They yowled and scattered, disappearing into the jungle as quickly as they had come. Sarah climbed down from the tree, her legs shaky from the adrenaline. Rex bounded over to her, nuzzling her with his massive head. She laughed, patting his scales. "We did it, Rex. We make a pretty good team, huh?" As the excitement of the battle faded, Sarah realized something incredible had happened. She and Rex had communicated, had worked together as true partners. It was a breakthrough that defied everything known about Rex's species. Over the next few days, Sarah and Rex fell into a routine. They would hunt together, with Rex using his strength and Sarah using her tools and strategy. Sarah worked on improving the signal of her beacon, all while trying to learn more about Rex and his abilities. She discovered that Rex was incredibly intelligent. He could understand complex instructions and even seemed to be trying to communicate back. Sarah began teaching him simple hand signals, which Rex picked up with astonishing speed. One afternoon, as they rested by a stream, Sarah had an idea. She picked up a stick and began drawing in the soft mud of the bank. Rex watched curiously as she sketched out simple shapes: a circle, a square, a triangle. "See, Rex," she said, pointing to each shape: circle, square, triangle. To her amazement, Rex extended one of his claws and began to trace the shapes in the mud. His movements were clumsy at first, but with each attempt, they became more precise. Sarah's mind whirled with the implications. Rex wasn't just intelligent. He was capable of learning, of adaptation. It was a discovery that could change the galaxy's understanding of his species. As the alien sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape, Sarah sat beside Rex, her hand resting on his scales. She thought about how far they'd come in such a short time. A human, and the galaxy's most feared predator, not just coexisting, but thriving together. "You know, Rex," she said softly, "when we get off this planet, and we will, things are going to change. For both of us. For everyone." Rex made a low, rumbling sound that Sarah had come to recognize as agreement. As the stars began to appear in the alien sky, Sarah felt a mix of emotions. She was still stranded on an unknown world, far from home. But she wasn't alone. She had made a friend, a partner, in the most unlikely of creatures. And together, they were about to challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans, about Rex's species, and about the possibilities of interspecies cooperation. Sarah smiled up at the stars. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, she and Rex would face them together. And that, she realized, made her feel stronger than she ever had before. The peaceful routine Sarah and Rex had established was shattered one morning by a deafening roar. It wasn't like anything they had heard before. It was mechanical, the sound of engines. Sarah's heart leaped. Could it be a rescue ship? But as she peered through the dense jungle canopy, her hope turned to dread. The ship that broke through the clouds was not a rescue vessel. It was a hunter's ship, notorious throughout the galaxy for its cruel pursuit of rare and dangerous species. "Oh no," Sarah whispered, her blood running cold. She turned to Rex, who was alert and tense beside her. "They're here for you." The ship landed in a clearing not far from their position, its engines kicking up a cloud of alien dust. As the dust settled, Sarah could see figures emerging. Tall, muscular aliens with advanced weaponry and cold, determined eyes. Sarah's mind raced. She couldn't let them take Rex. Not only was he her friend, but he was intelligent, capable of learning and communication. If only she could make the hunters understand. "Rex," she said urgently, "we need to hide. Come on." They retreated deeper into the jungle, moving as quietly as they could. Sarah could hear the hunters crashing through the underbrush behind them, their harsh voices carrying through the air. As they ran, Sarah's survival instincts kicked in. She began to formulate a plan. If they couldn't outrun the hunters, maybe they could outsmart them. "Rex," she whispered, "I have an idea, but I need you to trust me completely. Can you do that?" Rex's 6 eyes blinked at her, and he made a soft purring sound that Sarah had come to recognize as agreement. Sarah quickly explained her plan, using the hand signals and simple words they had developed together. Rex listened intently, his intelligent eyes never leaving her face. As the sounds of the hunters grew closer, Sarah and Rex put their plan into action. They split up, with Sarah heading towards a nearby river and Rex circling back towards the hunter's ship. Sarah's heart pounded as she ran, praying that her plan would work. She reached the river and waded in, using the water to mask her scent. Then she began to make as much noise as possible, splashing and shouting. The hunters, hearing the commotion, changed direction. They burst out of the jungle at the river's edge, their weapons trained on Sarah. "Where is the beast?" one of them demanded in broken galactic standard. Sarah stood her ground, her chin lifted defiantly. "There is no beast," she said clearly. "Only a misunderstood intelligent being. One that I've befriended." The hunters laughed, a harsh, cruel sound. "Impossible," their leader sneered. "Zix are mindless killers. And we will have this one's head as a trophy." But as he spoke, a loud explosion rocked the jungle. The hunters whirled around to see smoke rising from where they had left their ship. Sarah smiled. Rex had done his part perfectly, using the makeshift explosives they had created together to disable the hunter's vessel. Before the shocked hunters could react, Rex burst from the jungle behind them. But instead of attacking, he calmly walked to Sarah's side, his massive form a stark contrast to her small human frame. The hunters raised their weapons, but hesitated when they saw Rex's behavior. Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak. "This is Rex," she said, her voice steady. "He is a Zix, yes, but he is also my friend. He can understand complex instructions. He can learn. He can communicate. He chose not to harm you or your ship, even though he could have. Doesn't that prove he's more than just a mindless killer?" To demonstrate, Sarah went through a series of hand signals. Rex responded to each one, performing actions that clearly showed intelligence and understanding. The hunters lowered their weapons, their faces a mix of confusion and awe. "How is this possible?" the leader asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah stood tall, her hand resting on Rex's scales. "It's possible because sometimes the universe surprises us. It's possible because intelligence and friendship can be found in the most unexpected places. And it's possible because humans don't give up, even when faced with the impossible." As the stunned hunters watched, Sarah turned to Rex. "What do you say, big guy? Should we show them what a human and a Zix can do when they work together?" Rex's response was a gentle nudge and a soft purr. Sarah smiled. They had faced down the galaxy's most feared predator and a team of ruthless hunters. Whatever came next, she knew they could handle it. Together, they had not just defied expectations, they had shattered them. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. A human had befriended a Zix, the most feared predator in known space. Sarah and Rex's story was on every newsfeed, every holographic display, and the topic of every conversation from the core worlds to the farthest reaches of explored space. It had been 3 standard months since the encounter with the hunters. Their disabled ship had sent out a distress signal, attracting the attention of a nearby galactic patrol vessel. When the patrol arrived, they found an unbelievable scene. A human woman and a Zix working together to teach a group of formerly ruthless hunters about interspecies cooperation. Now, Sarah and Rex found themselves on Centauri Prime, the bustling heart of galactic civilization. They stood before the Galactic Council, the assembled representatives of every sentient species in the known universe. Sarah felt small in the vast, domed chamber. Thousands of eyes of all shapes, sizes, and colors were fixed upon her and Rex. But she stood tall, drawing strength from Rex's solid presence beside her. The head counselor, a tall, willowy being with shimmering silver skin, spoke. "Sarah Chen of Earth and Rex of Zix Prime, you stand before us today as living proof that the impossible is possible. Your friendship has shaken the very foundations of our understanding of interspecies relations. We would hear your story in your own words." Sarah took a deep breath and began to speak. She told them of her crash landing, of her first terrifying encounter with Rex. She described how they learned to communicate, to trust each other, to work as a team. As she spoke, Rex used the hand signals they had developed to add his own commentary, which Sarah translated. The chamber was silent, every being present hanging on their every word. When Sarah described how they had outsmarted the hunters, a murmur of amazement rippled through the crowd. "But the most important thing we learned," Sarah concluded, her voice strong and clear, "is that intelligence, empathy, and the capacity for friendship exist in places we least expect. Rex is not a mindless killer. He is a thinking, feeling being, and I'm proud to call him my friend." Rex made a soft purring sound, gently bumping his head against Sarah's shoulder in a gesture of affection. The assembled council members gasped at this display. The head counselor leaned forward, their silver eyes wide with wonder. "This is truly remarkable. But what would you have us do with this information? How can we apply what you've learned to our galactic society?" Sarah smiled. This was the moment she had been waiting for. "I propose a new initiative," she said. "A program of cultural exchange and communication between all species, especially those we think we understand, but actually know very little about. Rex and I are living proof that with patience, open-mindedness, and a willingness to learn, even the most unlikely of friendships can flourish." She turned to Rex, who nodded encouragingly. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, I believe it's time to reassess our classification of sentient species. Rex and his kind are clearly intelligent. They deserve rights, protection, and a voice in this council." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of voices. Some councillors were nodding in agreement, while others were shouting objections. The head councillor raised their hands for silence. "This is a lot to consider," they said. "It goes against centuries of established galactic law and custom." And yet, they paused, looking at Sarah and Rex standing side by side. "And yet we cannot deny the evidence before us. Perhaps it is time for a change." As the council began to debate, Sarah felt a wave of hope wash over her. She knew there would be challenges ahead. Changing the minds of an entire galaxy wouldn't be easy. But as she looked up at Rex, saw the intelligence shining in his many eyes, she knew it would be worth it. A small blue-skinned being approached them, a translator device clutched in its tentacles. "Excuse me," it said, its voice tinny through the translator. "I'm a reporter for the Galactic News Network. Would you be willing to share your story with our viewers? The whole galaxy is eager to learn more about your incredible friendship." Sarah grinned. "What do you say, Rex? Ready to show the galaxy what a human and a Zix can do together?" Rex's response was a happy rumble and a series of quick hand signals that made Sarah laugh. As they followed the reporter to a quieter area for the interview, Sarah couldn't help but feel excited about the future. They had already changed the course of galactic history, and this, she realized, was only the beginning. 5 years had passed since Sarah and Rex's appearance before the Galactic Council. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted, all because of an unlikely friendship between a human and a Zix. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the Interspecies Cooperation Station, a massive space structure orbiting a neutral planet. Below her, delegates from hundreds of worlds were arriving for the annual Galactic Unity Conference. Rex approached, his movements graceful despite his large size. He had grown even bigger over the years, but his 6 eyes still held the same intelligence and warmth that Sarah had come to love. "Can you believe it, Rex?" Sarah said, gesturing to the bustling docking bays below. 5 years ago, half of these species wouldn't even talk to each other. Now look at them. Rex made a series of hand signals, which Sarah understood perfectly. "We did this," he signed. "Together." Sarah smiled, patting his scaly hide affectionately. "We sure did, big guy." Their story had inspired a wave of change across the galaxy. The Interspecies Communication Initiative that Sarah had proposed was now in full swing. Thousands of volunteers from various species had signed up to live on worlds very different from their own, learning to communicate and cooperate with beings they once feared or misunderstood. But perhaps the biggest change had been for the Zix. Once seen as mindless killers, they were now recognized as a fully sentient species. Rex had become their ambassador, working tirelessly to build bridges between his kind and the rest of the galaxy. As they watched, a ship bearing the emblem of Zix Prime docked at the station. A group of Zix emerged, smaller than Rex, but just as regal. They were led by a human woman, her face alight with excitement, as she guided them towards the conference hall. "Looks like the new batch of human Zix teams is here," Sarah observed. "Remember when people thought we were crazy for suggesting humans could work with Zix?" Rex rumbled in amusement, his version of a laugh. A chime sounded, indicating the conference was about to begin. Sarah straightened her ambassador's uniform and took a deep breath. "Ready to give our speech, partner?" Rex nodded, falling into step beside her as they made their way to the main hall. The conference room was a sea of diverse beings, creatures of all shapes, sizes, and colors sat side by side, a sight that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. As Sarah and Rex took the stage, a hush fell over the crowd. Sarah stepped up to the microphone. "Welcome, friends, to the 5th Annual Galactic Unity Conference. 5 years ago, many of you thought this day would never come. Some of you probably wished it wouldn't." This earned a ripple of laughter from the audience. "But here we are," Sarah continued, "united not in spite of our differences, but because of them. We've learned that diversity isn't just beautiful, it's powerful. Each of our species brings unique strengths to the table. Together, we are stronger than we ever were apart. Rex stepped forward, and Sarah translated his hand signals for the audience. Rex wants you to know that even the oldest grudges, the deepest fears, can be overcome with patience, understanding, and an open mind. As they continued their speech, Sarah felt a swell of pride. The galaxy wasn't perfect. There were still conflicts, still misunderstandings. But they were making progress, one friendship at a time. After the speech, as delegates crowded around to talk to them, a young Zix approached with its human partner. The human, a freckled young man, looked nervous but determined. "Ambassador Sarah," he said, "your story inspired us to join the program. We just wanted to thank you and Rex for everything you've done." Sarah smiled warmly. "What's your name?" "I'm Tom, and this is Zara," he said, gesturing to the Zix beside him. "Well, Tom and Zara, thank you for being part of this. Every friendship like yours brings us one step closer to true unity." As the young pair moved away, Sarah turned to Rex. "You know, when I crashed on your planet, I thought it was the worst day of my life. Turns out it was the best, for both of us and for the whole galaxy." Rex's response was to gently bump his head against hers, a gesture that needed no translation. As they looked out over the crowded conference hall, Sarah felt a sense of peace. The future was bright, full of possibilities they were only beginning to explore. And whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew that the bonds of friendship, between individuals, between species, between worlds, would see them through. In the end, it wasn't advanced technology or military might that had changed the galaxy. It was understanding. It was empathy. It was friendship. And it had all started with a human who dared to see beyond appearances, and a monster who turned out to be so much more.